Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. I'd like to talk to you guys today about Jupiter, Chiron, Venus, Vesta, and Chariklo, all lining up in a magnificent pattern. Now, this particular transit is sort of ages away in a sense, but I just felt a real calling to come on and talk about it now for various reasons, but anyway, I just did. So here I am. There is a full moon coming up, and I'll come back to talk about that. Full moon's it's a bit gnarly. So anyway, I'll leave that one out for now. So Jupiter in Aries, going back into Pisces again, and then coming back into Aries later at the end of this year. Chiron moving retrograde in Aries. So Jupiter and Chiron in Aries going to catch up. By the time they catch up, Venus will be in Aries, so she will line up there with them as well. Vesta, the goddess Vesta, is there in Aries as well. And the goddess Chariklo will be forming a sextile aspect to all these planets because Chariklo is in Aquarius. Chariklo is such a fascinating goddess, centaur archetype, and she's going to spend quite a few years in Aquarius, actually. She'll be there until, I think it was 2028, so quite a few years. And I think her presence in Aquarius is extremely profound relative to Pluto ingressing into Aquarius. And she was part of the conjunction of Saturn-Pluto when this whole narrative began about 3 years ago that has pointed to the incredible shifts on the earth plane. There's one level, obviously, that has appeared on the physical, mundane level, which has been projected as a particular narrative, which has harmed a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But from the point of view of spirituality, shifting consciousness and ascension, there's a lot of positive things that are going on because we're sort of evolving at quite a rapid rate, if you like, particularly when Pluto goes into Aquarius. Anyway, in any case, Chariklo, who represents a lot of different things. I've just been doing a lot more research on her of late, and she's speaking very strongly to me. And nothing happens by chance or coincidence. Even the things that come to your own consciousness, the things that flower in your psyche and your consciousness and your awareness are usually triggered through your own birth chart. So, for example, Chariklo in Aquarius is transiting my ascendant at the moment, because I have an Aquarius ascendant. So the ascendant is reflective of coming into a new awareness of something, right, about yourself, for instance. So the presence of Chariklo over my ascendant, she's speaking straight into an aspect of my soul, because esoterically, the ascendant is the soul. And it's also the birthing of new consciousness, new ideas, new journeys and so forth. And so that's what's happening with me, which is why I'm very drawn to her energy at the moment. And she's actually very prominently placed in my own birth chart. She's conjunct my Venus. So yeah, she's a very strong archetype. Now, let me actually just bring up the chart that I want us to look at. As I said, it's a while away, as you can see it here. Just enlarge that a little bit. So this chart is drawn for the 11th of March. And if I just go back a couple of days, just a few days actually, even like from the 1st of March, you can actually see that there's Vesta, that's the symbol for Vesta. There's Venus, they're both in Aries. And they are applying themselves, approaching, if you like, Jupiter and Chiron, right? So out of these four bodies, Vesta and Venus are the faster moving bodies. So they're going to catch up to the Jupiter-Chiron conjunction. And so these energies are in play really for the, first sort of couple of weeks, if you like, of March, right? And whilst that seems like quite some time away, I think it's still important to just have a look at from now and absorb it, reflect on it, and work with the energy. It's a very, very important energy, and I'll explain why. Before I do, also obviously pay attention to where Aries is in your birth chart, right? You may use whole sign houses, you may use a quadrant house system. That's entirely up to you. I use both. I look at both because both are actually relevant and both are active simultaneously. They just reflect different levels of life experiences, right? So wherever the Aries house is for you, this is where this energy is being activated. Now, there is no calculation for Chariklo in this particular software program. So I use another program to see, her movements. It's an ephemeris basically. And at this point, at this date, she's sitting at around about 10, 11 Aquarius, somewhere around there, okay? So Aquarius to Aries forms a sextile, okay? It's 60 degrees away. That's called a sextile aspect. Now, Chariklo was the wife of Chiron. And the most common theme that is communicated about her is that she was the wife of Chiron, who basically helped him heal in all the various facets that would have been that would have played out, right? And so typically when we think of Chariklo, we think of a healer, a helper, a nurturer, a carer, right? Someone who takes care. And she is all of those things. But upon further investigations, research on her, I've discovered a lot of other things about her. And there's one section here where it says the wife of Chiron probably functioned as a sacred prostitute in the matriarchal temples. In our society, she refers to social boundaries, especially those of a cross-gender or sexual nature. She examines interactions to determine the intent of the scenario prior to judging it or responding emotionally. She represents healing and interpersonal discrepancies on all levels. Studying boundaries from the aura energy point of view offers the insights of Chariklo. She also asks for momentary pause before taking an aggressive response to any relationship injustice. So boundaries is a really important key word here with the body of Chariklo, and also sexuality to some extent, a sacred prostitute in the matriarchal temples. And it's interesting because Vesta is up here as well, and Vesta is a symbol of many things, and the deepest reflection of Vesta is the soul, the flame inside us that we tend to become more integrated and more in touch with the soul energy of who we are. And of course, she's a symbol of sexuality, sexual complexes, and denying the denial of sexual acts, deprivation, solitude, things like that. She's very, very complex. But having her here in this lineup while Chariklo is going to be forming a sextile, there's something very important happening here with two goddesses connecting together, three actually, with Venus as well. And Venus is also a goddess of sensuality, which can, of course, be experienced as sexuality as well, right? So there's a strong energy here of our own sensual, sexual desires, if you like. And I suppose that would speak more directly into our intimate relationships if we are in a relationship. and also perhaps the boundaries, the matter of boundaries that either need to be worked on or further developed or more clearly understood in our relationships. And actually, even if we are not in a relationship, what are our boundaries like when we are relating to others? Boundaries is such an important integration in our beingness, because if we don't have healthy boundaries in play, we get entangled in energy, in thoughts, in a number of different things with others, and we become enmeshed in worlds or layers of things that don't even really belong to us. And we can also project a lot of material onto others as well. And we can also have others project lots of things onto us. And if we don't have clear boundaries in play, then we can send the wrong messages, receive the wrong messages. I don't like to use the word wrong, but sometimes it's an easy word to use just to define a context, right? But if I wasn't going to use that word, perhaps I would say something like, accepting and projecting energy or material that isn't conducive to your well-being, mentally, physically, spiritually, psychically, and so forth. So boundaries is a very big deal in our development through life, right? And because Chariklo does actually connect to boundaries, then there's something offered here. It's a gift because it's a sextile, and sextile aspects offer opportunities. Now, what is the opportunity? The opportunity here speaks directly to Vesta, Venus, Jupiter, Chiron. So there's a bunch of layers here with these archetypes. We've got Vesta in terms of what do we want to focus on? The focus in Aries is going to be on ourself, not from a narcissistic, selfish perspective, but from a perspective of getting more deeply connected to our own sense of identity and who we are becoming as well, because we are forever changing, transforming, evolving, and that doesn't happen overnight. It happens over every lifetime. So the very instinctual, intended focus on the self, Aries, Vesta. Venus in Aries is in her detriment, but given that she's showing up here in this particular alignment, she's also pointing to the matters of self-worth, the matters of values, the matters of valuing ourselves, valuing what we inject our love towards. Venus. Vesta in Aries, what are we focusing on? What are we investing ourselves into, right? And Jupiter in Aries is an amazing placement, and it's amazing for so many reasons, but in this little concoction here, it's really pointing to the ability to expand, grow, experience fortunate actions, because action is Aries, fortunate is Jupiter, and also risks as well. Life is a risk. I've said this in numerous videos. Life is risky from the time we're born, even before we're born. Sometimes, a baby will be born and sadly it will pass. It will leave the world through that birth process because something happens, right? So life is a risk right from our first breath, right? And we need to take risks to grow, and sometimes those risks end up being really effective and valuable and beneficial, And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they hurt us in certain ways. But if we don't fall down and then get back up again, we become stagnant. So it's important to take risks, right, in life at certain times. And Jupiter in Aries will have tremendous confidence and courage to take, to plunge into risks, right, adventures, beginning something new in life as well. Now, it starts to get really interesting here because Chiron and Jupiter, which form they're already in alignment here, but in terms of their exactness, it occurs around about here, right, when they're both at 14 degrees of Aries, right? And you can see Vesta's just trailing behind them. So she's moving quite slow. Venus has moved on a fair bit. Juno's there in Aries as well, so more material around relationships. So with the Jupiter-Chiron conjunction, which draws in these feminine archetypes as well, it's amazing actually, because when you think about the myth of Chiron, without going into the complexities of the entire myth, the summary version, right? Chiron was set free of his suffering because Chiron was wounded, sort of actually practically from birth, right? Because both of his parents rejected him because he was half human, half horse. So the Chiron wound is there right from the beginning. It's not there just because he was wounded in his heel through Hercules shooting the arrow, right? The wound goes much deeper than that, okay? And so Chiron's myth and wound centers very much around the fear of being rejected, which is what happened to him. So he lived for about over 900 years, by the way, so he had a really long life of a lot of suffering, actually. But anyway, through that journey, he became an incredible healer. As we all know, when we hear about Chiron, the first words that come to our mind is the wounded healer, right? Because he was wounded and he was a healer, and he lived for over 900 years. And Chariklo must have lived that whole time as well, I guess, because she was there as his wife, helping him. Now, he spent most of his time in a cave, living in a cave. That's also a metaphor and symbolic of to tend to our own chironic wounds, we must enter that deeper space within. We experience the sense of woundedness of Chiron themes in our life and in ourself from that external plane through different experiences. But to get to the core and the heart of Chiron, we have to go inside that cave. As I said a moment ago, Chiron was ultimately set free. And when he was set free, that's when he was free of his suffering and his wounds and his pains and so forth. That part of the myth corresponds to Jupiter and Uranus. So, long story short, Uranus stole the fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, which is consciousness. That's why Uranus is the body that's known to wake us up. It's not always comfortable, but it's always necessary. So in order for, so Chiron steals the fire from the gods, which is consciousness, wakes up humanity, because he didn't like that Jupiter was withholding consciousness from humanity. He thought it was unfair, which then brings in the Aquarian archetype. That's why Aquarius is also very big on justice, fairness, equality, humanity, right? So Jupiter decides to punish Uranus, or Prometheus is another name, and Zeus is another name for Jupiter. Prometheus is another name for Uranus. So Jupiter, of course, being the king of the gods, punishes Uranus by tying him to a rock and having a vulture peck at his liver 24 hours around the clock, where his liver would recover, it would sort of grow back, recover, and then he'd have to go through the whole suffering of that process, just ongoing, right? This vulture would just come and peck at his liver. And so Chiron comes into this story where Hercules, who was in one myth was responsible for Chiron's wound in terms of shooting the arrow, and what am I thinking? I'm thinking Achilles and the hill, Achilles hill. Okay, so Chiron wasn't shot in the hill, so that's not that part of the story actually connects to Achilles. So just let me go back and find my way in there. So Hercules wounds Chiron, that's in one myth, and that's said to be why he was forever wounded, because he couldn't heal himself. And so Hercules has a chat with Jupiter, pleads with him, and asks him to do an exchange between Uranus and Chiron. The exchange was that if you release Uranus, Prometheus, from being chained to a rock and being eaten by a vulture, his liver being eaten by a vulture, we can help Chiron by releasing him and making him immortal so that he can end his suffering, and Uranus can also end his suffering. And so Jupiter decides to release Uranus, and the exchange occurs because Chiron is made into the constellation of Sagittarius, right? That's it's pretty interesting, and it gets pretty sort of muddled and a little bit confusing, but that's the short of the story, right? And so I'm explaining that because Jupiter and Chiron coming together is quite a profound transit, quite a profound portal of energy, because of their link in mythology, and because Chiron's suffering came to an end because of a decision that Jupiter made with Uranus, Hercules, and Chiron. And so two gods were released from their suffering as a result of that story. And so here you have Jupiter and Chiron lining up in Aries. So it is obvious, well, to me it is, that there's a very strong positive implication here of tremendous release of suffering and wounding that we ourselves may have, may be holding on to, maybe psychically, maybe emotionally, maybe physically, whatever it is, right? And the gift of Jupiter comes along, right? That the god of abundance, growth, expansion, opportunities comes along and forms a conjunction to Chiron. And so it is always important when you see these archetypes forming these patterns in the sky, you go back to their myths, go back to their stories, and remember, you know, what they each represent. So it's got to be extremely significant that Jupiter and Chiron come to this alignment, which has got to do with tremendous healing for every single individual. Aries is the individual. It's our own sense of self and our own sense of identity. And that's a big deal. And Jupiter rules things that are big, right? It's the largest planet in the solar system, right? It corresponds to everything that expands, you know, beyond the horizons and the limitations that our left linear brain might perceive. And with Saturn's influence, we can become very contracted in our visions. Jupiter helps us expand beyond those limitations, if they are so limiting that they actually make it very challenging for us to grow, and to grow, we've got to take risks. We've got to step into territory that's not so comfortable. So there's a very promising alignment, showing up here with Jupiter and Chiron. It's an opportunity basically to give birth to tremendous courage, right? Stepping into the wounds that we hold deep inside ourself, Aries, which, as I said earlier, may be experienced out there through different relationships. We have different experiences, but fundamentally, this all comes back to the matter of, for us to see a world out there that's like the golden age, where we are living in our true, authentic abundance and highest levels of our beingness. There's a lot that we've got to clear and heal within ourselves. And that's what this energy speaks to. It's tremendous, potent power energy to help us work on those deeper wounds that we hold in our own identity, which some may be imprinted, some may be false. When I say false, what I mean is we, through conditioned experiences and the conditioned level of life, we may have accumulated lots of different components that speak to being held back, not being able to be ourself for fear of being rejected. Chiron, that's what happened to him. He got rejected. So Jupiter, who was the one that ultimately helped set Chiron free, because he set Uranus free, and Chiron was made the constellation Sagittarius, right? So there's a tremendous opportunity here for deep, profound healing to occur on our own sense of identity. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The more we heal who we are, who we think we are, who we have been, who we want to be, the more we work on ourselves, in other words, the more possibility that we'll see a different reality. We can't see a different reality whilst we are holding the opposite position internally. That would be what's called in psychology an incongruence, when we're not being authentic. So there's tremendous opportunity here to work on those things in ourselves. And as I said, Chariklo forms a sextile to all these bodies here. And she's very important in this story because she's Chiron's wife. So this can really speak very strongly to our personal relationships, of course, because Libra is opposite Aries, right? And so any archetype we're exploring, there's always a polarity. And what's the polarity here? It's actually my sense of self, my own sense of identity, and how I'm projecting that in relation to others or in relation to my relationships, Libra. And the more I can actually work on myself, my own fears, my own sense of inadequacies and insecurities and whatnot, the more I can bring a healthier version of myself into my relationships, Libra. The other thing that strikes me as really profound as well is that the sun god Apollo was actually one of the gods that helped Chiron in the sense of he basically taught Chiron how to hunt, how to practice astrology, music, prophecy, because Apollo represents all those things, right? And he was one of the main gods that taught and helped Chiron. And Artemis as well, Artemis, the goddess Artemis, was there helping too. Anyway, relative to Apollo, the sun god, that God is just incredible, actually, the amount of things that he represents. But anyway, without going into everything that he represents, he is a sun god. So what does that mean? It means that he lights shit up, lights things up, illuminates, whatever it's touching. And so at this time of these alignments, the sun god Apollo is conjunct the south node in Scorpio down here. And whilst one might think, well, how is that relevant here? It's not really making any significant aspects. Well, it's forming a trine to Saturn, Saturn's ingress into Aries at this stage, which I'm going to come back and talk about that at a later stage. But the reason I think it's important in this story is because Apollo was Chiron's teacher. The South Node represents the collective period, and the material that's coming up through Scorpio are a lot of hidden components to things, to personalities, people, identities, families, whatever it may be. Lots of skeletons are coming out of the closet. Lots of things are being revealed. And a lot of the things that are being revealed are things that we need to flush and clear and remove and release. They've been suppressed or hidden. There's material coming up showing us the truth of things that we didn't realize before because of how it was presented and glossed over, as it were. So there's a lot of things being churned up. And with sun god Apollo on that south node, because Apollo is the light god, solar god, he's going to put light, further light onto this south node in Scorpio, right? Which, it's getting ready there to move out of Scorpio as well. So just before it leaves Scorpio, sun god Apollo comes along and activates some further things that we need to see, light. And it's happening while all these energies are lining up here with Vesta, Jupiter, Chiron, Venus, and the goddess Chariklo. And this is all really promising. It's really, really promising. And I would encourage you to really reflect on the essence of the Aries archetype in you, in your own chart, and the themes and things that I pointed to with these particular archetypes. And I've just been reminded, thank you, with this Venus energy here, and as I said, with the Aries archetype, we've got to bring in the opposite, which is Libra, because it's a polarity we are always working with. The focus, of course, is up here in the Aries energy. A few months before this, the Venus star point ingresses into Libra. And that's a huge, clock working in the background, as I often say. It's a cosmic clock relative to Venus, Venus's position forming a conjunction to the sun, the Cazimi conjunction. That's one small pattern, which is the Venus star point that we have, Venus retrograde cycles, Venus direct cycles, etc. But then the Venus star point speaks to 120 year cycle, magnified, bigger picture stuff. And the fact that it's happened before the ingress of these energies, I think, is also showing that the healing that is promising here is feeding into and speaking into the future of relating and relationships, Venus. And that's a big deal because conflict, war, violence, aggression happens in relationship to others because of different opinions, different perspectives, different beliefs. And that will, it'll always be there in this world of duality. We're all going to have, different opinions, different beliefs, and different perspectives. And that is not the problem. The problem is when we need to feel that our perspective is right, our belief is wrong, and therefore that perspective and belief can't be right. Because how can we both be right? Well, we can. That's the ego that gets in the way, that says, well, no, if you're right, then I'm wrong. And I can't have that. I've got to be right. So I've got to make you wrong. It kind of starts there, and it gets, into bigger layers where it creates, war, right? Conflicting beliefs and perspectives on ownership, over countries and land and so on and so forth. That shit's got to end. It started thousands of years ago. Back in the matriarch days, nobody owned land. Because the truth is, nobody owns land. Gaia she's an entity unto herself. And humans came onto this earth and thought that they could have ownership over her body. How absurd is that, really, when you think about it? It's a pretty screwed up system that has, created division, has created class systems and, poverty, and goes on and on and on and on. But with the Venus star point ingressing into Libra, there's a lot more hope for the future, pointing towards a more harmonious, balanced and integrated experience of relating and relationships. And this little pocket of energy right here for a couple of weeks is a profound window where we can really work on ourselves to heal whatever we need to heal, so that we can actually have a healthier way of relating to others, which can be harmonious, healthy, harmonious, balanced, peaceful Venus, right? So that's what I feel these energies here are speaking to. Jupiter in Aries can be, really going for it with a specific enterprise, something that you creatively have been working on, could be a business venture, it could be any number of different things. So there's that as well, but at a more soul, spiritual, meaningful level, outside of the manifestations on the physical plane. This energy speaks to the abundance that is offered for our growth to get to a real authentic level of understanding who we are, Aries, and working through the imprints and the layers and the conditions that have set in, so that we can actually give birth to a healthy sense of identity. Aries, health being Chiron, healing. So it's all there, right? It's literally all there. And I was reminded of this energy yesterday. I went and had some treatment. I do Chinese cupping for some injuries that I've got, and I find that particular practice really, really powerful for the things that I'm dealing with. And the lady who's doing the treatments for me, she's a Virgo, and she's just amazing. I'd love to see her chart, and maybe one day I'll ask her. We'll see. But she's got the Chiron healing hands. The way she navigates through shiatsu massage, cupping and needling, just her whole understanding of the body and all the meridians and chi and all that sort of stuff. She's just amazing. And I know a good practitioner because I've been seeing practitioners for years due to some injuries that I've got. And I'm laying there, and I was feeling quite distressed yesterday. And she said to me, as she's doing some work on me, she must have just picked up on my energy, and she just said, "Are you okay?" And I just, like a whole flood of emotions just came very, like it was like a big, massive tornado just came right through my body, and I just burst out in tears, not hysterically, but there was a strong flow of emotion that was released. And there's various reasons for that, which I don't care to disclose because it's my private sort of life, if you like. But that experience so really got me into thinking about these energies and just how important they are actually. Because, yeah, very simply put, the more we can heal our own fractured or broken parts of ourselves, because we all have them. I don't care who you are. You'll have something about you that isn't perfect. So, you know, this is good material. This is good stuff to work on those things, you know, and become lighter. The physical body is so dense and can feel so heavy at times, right? And the wounds can pass through so many layers of our beingness, right? Through to our light body, our emotional body, spiritual body, mental body. You know, there's lots of layers there. And when you're working on these components in yourself with your chart, I mean, another good thing to do is to go and see a practitioner that can get the energy moving in your body. And Chinese medicine is just brilliant at that. You know, that's just, they work with prana, which is chi, which is energy in your body. And those hundreds or thousands of meridian points in the body connect to the energy that's either blocked, stagnant, stuck, and so forth. And so when you have a particular session like that, and you know, there's some material that is quite painful for you for whatever reason that may be, then the awareness of these sorts of energies in conjunction with having a treatment like that, for instance, can really release the energy that needs to be released in the body, right? So that you can actually work with these energies in an obvious and effective manner. Because when she said to me, "Are you okay?" and I burst out in tears because it was just lovely to hear somebody say to me, "Are you okay?" Right? Because people might say to you, "Hi, how you doing? Are you okay?" But they don't stop to it's just like a habit, right? Nobody really wants to know how you are. And she did want to know, and I didn't verbalize what I was communicating, but I didn't need to. Just her holding that space and being present there for me and asking me that through a genuine channel was enough for a healing to occur, for a release to occur. And then when I left and I came home, I reflected on what I'm talking about at the moment, and I slept reasonably well because there was a big shift in my energy. And I'm sharing this story, personal story, because it's relevant to our chironic journey, our Chiron wounds, and the different ways we can approach on recovering lost aspects of ourselves and discovering new aspects of who we are becoming, and the healing that can happen in that, which then feeds into how we relate to others, the relationships we form, which then leads to healthier, more balanced, neutralized, fair experiences and relationships, and the way we see life and the way we see others, and so on and so forth. So it feeds into one thing, just has this ripple effect. You know, there are layers upon layers upon layers. So anyway, these energies are hovering around for a while relative to Jupiter and Chiron, but their exactness doesn't occur until 11th of March. Let's just go back. So I would say I just want to go right back. Just bear with me while I just... I just want to see how close they got. So 24th of August. Okay, let's just bring it back to about now. So this is a couple of days ago. Now they're both moving retrograde, right? And Jupiter's about 8 degrees away, right? So, I mean, realistically, we could say that we can be consciously tuning into this vibration from now, August 2022, right? But as Jupiter continues to go retrograde, it goes into Pisces, right? So there it is there in Pisces. And just an added note about Jupiter going back into Pisces, you know, one very simple thing to think about with Jupiter going back into Pisces and then eventually getting back to Aries to complete the journey in Aries. I think this is important that Jupiter goes retrograde and back into Pisces, because Jupiter's cycle is 12 years, right? And so when Jupiter enters Aries, that's a brand new 12-year cycle relative to Jupiter. And so the backward motion, if you like, back into Pisces it's an opportunity for us to check back in on our visions and our dreams and things that we may need to close and finish as well, because Pisces is where completion happens. It's where things end. So it can be both. It can be recognizing and seeing certain things that we need to finish, or certain dreams that haven't been actualized, and now we come to the sense or understanding that those particular dreams won't, perhaps. Maybe they were just completely way too idealistic. I don't know, right? It just depends on the individual. But it can also be a stepping into seeing those greater visions as well, Pisces, as we journey back with Jupiter going back into Aries, so that when Jupiter gets back into Aries to finally complete the journey in Aries, we can inject those visions, those dreams into a brand new cycle of Jupiter in Aries, which is tremendous fortitude, courage, taking risks. And, you know, taking risks is different for each of us. I don't mean to be stupid, but you know, then again, I can't even say that, because you may want to take a risk doing X, Y, Z, and somebody might say that as silly, but for you, that's not silly. That's the very thing that you need to be risque about, right? So you can't define it in those ways. You can't say this is a good risk and this is not such a good risk. It just depends on who you are and where you're at with your growth and so forth. So that's what I wanted to share today. And I think it's great material to reflect upon. Just some other things about Chariklo. One of the lines that I saw that I really loved was Chariklo would be gazing into the future, questioning reality, investigation, imagination, skepticism, speculation, obsession, beauty, glamour, grace, glitter, insecurities, boundaries, alienation, need for affirmation and acceptance. Quite a few different words that we don't often hear with this particular archetype, which I think can be important to reflect on, given that she's so prominent in this 3D story that's been playing out the last 3 years because of her journey through Capricorn, where she was in Capricorn when this journey started, now into Aquarius, taking us into the future, Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius. Those are the bigger picture levels of Chariklo in Aquarius, but just relative to this lineup that I was focusing on now, she's in a harmonious relationship to these energies, supporting supporting all those things that I mentioned. So it's up to us what we do with this, and if indeed we do anything at all. But I thought I'd put it out there and share it, and yeah, whoever it speaks to, and I'll be back soon with the full moon in Aquarius. It's about a week away. I think, yeah, it's pretty challenging full moon, but that again would depend on the individual, what's being activated in your chart. But as a collective energy, it's not going to be easy because it's in a grand fixed cross. It's conjunct Saturn, square Uranus, tremendous tension going on there. So it's going to be an interesting one. But I'll see you guys very, very soon. Much love, many blessings, and thanks for listening. And subscribe if you find this material interesting, and share this video, and share your comments and questions and so forth. And see you soon. Bye.